Well, we've now made it to giving away more free content on YouTube. Mr. Matt Berkey. Why do you have a hat that says fish on it?
It says fish?
Yeah, it literally says fish, like X fish. Oh, it says X fish. Well, it says the Under Armour sign first, but
Sure.
X fish.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's pretty strong.
It's a fishing hat, I guess.
It's an egg. You're an X fish.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we are back. And by back, I mean this is the first goddamn episode of this new show that they're making me do here.
It's not new. We did this on our subsite.
Exactly. And I was trying to get to that. You know, I wanted you to like explain that this isn't new. It's just new for them.
Yeah.
The 4,375 people that have not seen this show yet.
Why isn't it the 13,800 people who are subscribed to this channel?
That's what I need. If you're subscribed to this channel, you got to watch the show. If you're not subscribed to this channel, you got to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and watch the show.
Right.
Yes. So do that right now, or else go watch Doug Polk. I don't give a fuck. Anyway, so this show is the sister show of Poker Out Loud. At this point, if you have not seen Poker Out Loud, feel free to do that. We are having a season 1 top 10 hands. And along with that, you get this podcast, which is an additional podcast to talk about the thoughts of one hand of that episode.
Yeah. So traditionally, we do seasons of Poker Out Loud behind the paywall at Solve For Why TV, and it alternates weeks. So we release Poker Out Loud, then the following week we release this podcast on Second Thought, where you and I kind of go back through, we listen to the in real time thoughts of what was taking place, and we kind of try to poke holes in where the thought process may fail.
Yeah.
As well as, you know, highlight the areas where we get it right. And I think it's really critical. I think it's a nice additional layer to learning where, you know, first in Poker Out Loud, it's like you get to see in real time where mistakes can potentially be occurring. But then also, like, when we get to come back through and rewatch the hands, it adds a nice little layer of, well, we should examine this spot, or maybe we should run this particular solve, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I think that throughout the Poker Out Loud seasons, I've learned a fair amount about my own play and how I play against you, and sometimes I punt. And then now I feel like I'm playing very good. So I think that looking back at season 1 is like pretty fun to see, because it feels like a long time ago now. Like,
it was a long time ago.
The strategies have changed. Like looking back,
I cringe watching these hands.
Yeah, but at the time, it's like pretty good. You know, like you think you're like pretty top tier. So let's talk about the hand we're going to talk about today. So it's going to be a Jordan hand. So for the longtime listeners, longtime followers of Solve For Why, they are familiar with Jordan. And it's always fun to look over his hands, because sometimes he does some wild shit.
He does some wild shit in his hand.
Yeah. So this is actually, I believe, number 9.
Yeah.
In the countdown. So,
you tried punting in number 10, but Nick wouldn't let you. He was punting too.
I had King 7 of diamonds.
Yeah.
I saw you 6-bet Ike Hexton with like the same candidate. Like, get out of here. Like, I have fucking this Nick Howard 10-6 suited.
When you know, man. You know?
Yeah, what are you talking about, man?
Yeah.
I'm out here in the streets.
I hear you.
I'd anticipate that both of these two to my left think I'm going to be raising very, very wide here on my button, which I will be relatively, but more so because Zach hasn't played any hands yet. I wouldn't be shocked to see Berkey 3-bet here.
50. So normally in this spot, I'm calling 100%. I think because I've played so few hands, it's worth considering 3-betting. But I think this hand just plays so well as a call, but I'm definitely widening my 3-bet range based on game flow in this spot.
This hand is going to begin with Jordan opening the button to 50 with ace queen of hearts at 5-10 no limit, and Zach's going to defend the queen nine of spades. Let's quickly talk about that, because I think that we've evolved a little bit since the 5x opens. What do you think about the sizings today?
Well, I just think it matters in the environment. It's all about range manipulation. So
right.
If people are going to start calling much, much tighter at 50 than they would at 30, then it behooves you to make it 30. If they're going to be much more aggressive versus a 30 raise than a 50, then it behooves you to make it 50. It's like it just comes down to understanding the ways in which environments are most exploitable in the subtleties.
But how about people like, okay, if you make it 50, are you supposed to raise with less hands? Because that's the real question, right?
Yeah, and I think that's probably true, particularly like when you're in these aggressive formations. But you're also handcuffing a lot of the aggressive tendencies that the small and big blind would like to take.
I don't agree with that.
Okay.
The reason is because I think they should just 3-bet more often. There's just more money out there. Unless you're correctly shrinking your range.
Yeah, that's true if you don't adjust your range.
Yeah,
but I think like when you're opening 5x, there's less of a need to be opening hands like like Jack 3 suited.
Yeah, or like Ace 7 offsuit.
Yeah,
but like okay,
it depends. I mean, that's just not going to face much aggression a lot, but
I understand.
But yeah, I mean, I think like people want to simplify as many streets as they possibly can. Very few people have a mixed strategy pre-flop, but why? Right? Just seems very reasonable, especially based on positional information, that we create some sort of mix where, we have a polar size and we have a linear size.
Zach here facing 5x from the big blind, queen 9 of spades. It feels like a mandatory VPIP. Looking at it today, feels like it's just a call, but I'm not sure facing the 5x. This is kind of confusing with the 5x.
Well, I don't think that there's like a metric we can look at that says this is right or wrong.
Yeah.
Queen 9 suit is just far too high up in the equity chart for us to be folding it. So yeah, there's a cutoff. If you open shoved, we're not calling.
Right, of course.
But
what number do you think? Like if you made a 10x, is a clear fold?
I mean, it's really just what the perceived range is in accordance to that size. The reason why we're folding to a shove is because the range isn't wide enough. Right. He just can't find enough hands to open shove, even if he does include bluffs. But whether we're talking about 3x, 5x, 10x, 20x, when stacks are at certain depths, then the ranges are probably going to be under-adjusted in accordance to the sizing. We saw a lot of this with Plorbis. Plorbis was opening to like these really haphazard sizes, and the humans struggled a lot to adjust.
Right.
And I think what it was literally implementing a mixed strategy pre.
So Zach's here sitting at 180 big blinds. I wonder if 3-betting is an option here. Like,
I think you have to go small, and that's fine for this hand, but it's kind of problematic for your range. So I think your range wants to go big, but I think hands like this want to go small.
I guess I'm just thinking let's just look at the parameters where 3-betting could be better than calling. We would need Jordan to be raising too many hands for 5x from the button.
Yeah.
I think we would need him to under 4-bet, which I think that would also be a thing. Him calling too often is a negative. Okay.
But I also think that's the thing.
Yeah.
I would rather do it with king queen.
Well, I mean, yeah, but that's a good hand.
But I guess I'm saying it because I think that queen 9 blocks a lot of the calls, or a lot of the hands that Jordan would auto call.
Okay, that's good.
No, it's bad because it opens up a lot more of the dusty hands that he would like just fall into a 4-bet
or fold.
Sure, but he's not a folder.
Yeah, it's annoying. I guess if this was 3x, it was just a normal auto call. Like the 5x's was making me a little bit like, okay, do we want to actually 3-bet this sometimes? And I guess like queen 10 suited, I would be like way more apt.
I mean, the thing is that like I don't think you need to make it a pre-flop game because it allows him to fall into accidental adjustments that are correct. You can just take him post because all those tendencies still apply to every single street. He's going to over c-bet and he's going to choose too large of a size, and you're now going to be able to over aggress and check raise much more aggressively.
I agree with that. It's a mixed strategy, guys, if you're listening. Okay, so Zach is going to agree with you. He's going to call. And the flop comes down 10 of spades, 6 of diamonds, deuce of diamonds. That's going to give Zach...
Oh, I thought it was a rainbow board.
No.
Oh, okay.
2 diamonds in it. Zach he's wrapped around the 10 of spades with queen 9 of spades, backdoor straight draw, backdoor flush draw over to the 10. Jordan now has ace, queen high with hearts. No hearts on board. 2 flush to the diamond and the 10 of spades.
I I'd anticipate this to be the best hand a pretty high percentage of the time, but I don't want to check back and allow my opponent to dictate the action for the rest of the hand. That goes for sizings, betting and not betting. There are a few good turns that I can barrel, like a jack and a king, and just betting this flop will provide myself a lot more clarity moving throughout this hand.
75 is the bet.
Jordan's gonna choose to bet, and he's gonna bet pretty big. He chooses to bet 75.
So I think that textures like this lend themselves, particularly button versus big blind, to a super high C betting frequency for sure, and a mixed betting strategy. I think it's very reasonable to have two bet sizes here.
Okay.
I think where Jack gets it wrong is the incentive of his hand.
I don't like betting this hand for this size. I'm not even sure I like betting this hand.
I think betting the hand is totally reasonable. I think betting the hand for this size is not. So that's why I'm saying he gets it wrong for the incentive. If we break it down through what are my betting strategies here, I think it's very reasonable to have quarter pot and 3/4 pot bets. I think that we have to be very particular about what bets 3/4 pot, and we could pretty much plug almost everything else into quarter pot.
So I'm unsure so this is kind of where that 5x kind of forces a problem set. I think when you 5x and you quarter pot here, it doesn't perform well because you've shrunk the range.
I don't think it's shrunk that much. I think like offsuit connectors are still calling.
Like which ones?
Like 7, 8, 8, 9.
No.
You think offsuit 8, 9 is just mucking?
Yes.
I don't think so. Definitely not 2 years ago.
I think Zach is folding that hand.
I think we can go back through the footage and see him not fold hands like that for $50.
Okay. I mean, that's fair. Okay. Looking at it today, though, I think if anyone 5x 8-9 hits the muck on the big blind.
I mean, if that's true, if you perceive that the big blind is folding that much to a 5x, then A, you're not incentivized to 5x, but B, now you only have one betting strategy, and it should just be the large one.
The large one,
yeah.
Right? Yeah, I agree with you.
But these are, I mean, let's be clear. Like all of this is assumptive base,
Well, of course.
but recognize that like that's what the entire industry is doing. So I don't care if you're talking about like us who are openly saying that we're exploitative versus like an Ike Haxton who is the dream machine.
Mm-hmm.
He's still operating off of his own base assumptions and
sure.
trying to manipulate them as best as possible.
Yeah, we're the realest podcast, man. We're the realest podcast. I'll say it. Yeah, I play exploitative. Yeah, I think he's tighter if you 5x. That seems like very fucking normal things to understand. Holy shit, man.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's look at the kind of how we would construct if we had two betting strategies. Obviously, let's just assume that let's make the assumption that this is a normal pot.
Yeah.
And Zach has a normal
Sure.
big blind defense range, right?
Sure.
Not shrunken by the 5x. The big size, I believe I would like to use with hands that are going to put pressure on hands like 6s, 6x's, hands that are going to make tough decisions for 7s on future streets and potentially shake off some ace high and some overs in terms of cleaning up that equity. So maybe a hand like Queen Jack of Spades, Queen Jack with a diamond, King Queen, King Jack, both of the same category set. And then maybe your protection bets are mixed in with like some 10x's, as well as like some 6x's, maybe some ace highs that are looking to protect as well.
We want to choose some of our highest equity hands. That's what I think is most critical.
Yeah.
So you're kind of delineating the showdown range versus the kind of diluted drawing range, if you will. So these are like overs with good removal properties where like they're blocking a lot of the 10x and stuff like that. I also think we want to be utilizing hands like 8-9 of diamonds.
For which side?
And 10x of diamonds for the bigger size.
Yeah. I see.
These are just our highest equity hands. And sure, it's annoying to have two diamonds in your hand, but when they're that low, I don't think that the properties are that bad. They block 10-8 and 10-9 of diamonds, which is really critical.
Yeah.
And your opponent could still have a lot of nut flush draws, which isn't necessarily a bad thing when you're entering through the bluff lens, because when you improve to your gut shot straight, you're nutted. Sometimes you're going to improve in a way that still gives you two outs to straight flushes. So that'll make your opponent have a hard time check raising or playing an aggressive strategy against you. And then also like in most instances when you make flushes, you're not going to get 3 streets anyway. So it's easy for you to shift your hand from bluff to bluff catcher as opposed to from like bluff to nuts.
How about like 8-9 of clubs?
Spades?
Yeah.
Oh, or clubs.
Or just like a different 8-9.
I think spades is more reasonable than clubs.
Right.
I don't even think it's close, actually. I think 8-9 of clubs probably would fit into the smaller betting strategy, if not a check back. I think spades fits a little bit better. My hesitancy, the real reason I'm leaning on 8-9 of diamonds.
I don't think the 8-9 of spades has like too much like relevant blocker value.
Right. So that was what I was getting back to. Is the real reason why I'm leaning on 8-9 of diamonds is because it's so pertinent in blocking Jack 9 of diamonds, 10 9 of diamonds, 10 8 of diamonds, Jack 8 of diamonds. Like these hands that can play a really large pot and are going to be high up in the equity distribution of our opponent. We just eliminate those right away, and we still leave them open to having like relevant combos, whether it's ace X with the ace of diamonds that feels the need to continue and then fold, or other flush draws that may fold unimproved, the board pairs, whatever. Like basically, the board texture is going to trend in our favor, turn and river. So when we start with this larger size, we want to be able to pull out on turn and river. And I don't think the other versions of 8-9 allow us to do that.
How many checkbacks do you think we should have here? Because it feels like, I honestly feel as if maybe there is a strategy where we have very little checkbacks, but then I still feel something tells me like ace queen of hearts here doesn't fall too often as a bet.
I think that the thing is that the quarter pot and the check are going to perform relatively close.
Right.
So like I don't think you're going to make a lot of errors delineating between the two. The only trouble that most people are going to have is if they're not mindful about how they choose their checks versus bets, they're going to bluff too often in the 25% pot realm, and that's okay. It just lands them on a lot of shutdowns on the turn.
And I think it's particular that we need to hold some good hands in this 25% because as we're going to see, like things are going to get complicated.
Yeah. And that's completely reasonable. I think for simplicity's sake, we don't necessarily need to examine a check back range. Mainly because both ranges are so fucking wide.
Yeah.
But if the big blinds range is tighter for any reason, or whatever the case may be, then would basically either split or eliminate the small bet.
There is something to be said though, as it pertains. People love when I say that word.
You say it a lot, man.
Hey man,
we're working on something. We're filming it this week.
A mí no me importa. Digan lo que quieran.
I don't know what that means.
I mean, it's I don't care. Say what you want. Yo.
Oh,
that's
shit.
Crazy.
Hey man, you've been gone.
It's like you can't leave anything with these guys, man. Don't leave your girlfriend. You can't leave anything. You can't leave your flag. This shit's about to get real. Anyway, there is something to be said as it pertains to when
just
two
say
ranges,
regarding.
Nah, I like the as it pertains. Makes me sound a little bit smarter.
Okay.
Check back two ranges that are wide. It puts the onus now on big blind to figure out a bluffing range.
That's true.
Which is tough.
Yeah, that's
when
true.
you have so many things to figure out. Because the benefit, obviously, of in-position betting is simply, forcing a minimum defense.
Right.
But in terms of like his clear defense are pretty obvious. When it goes check, now figuring out what hands he bets versus checks and figuring out those plays are pretty tough.
But it becomes a lot easier when you have no incentive to check back a 10 or a set or anything of that nature, or over pairs. So it's like this check back range is so capped.
For sure.
And I mean, sure, you could like work really hard to have a balanced check back range, but I don't think the juice is worth the squeeze.
Right. It'll be like some aces and stuff like that.
Yeah, it just seems like we're really reaching here to try to like back end some value and make sure we're not exploitable.
All right. So Jordan bets 75. We agree, slightly too large of size for this candidate. And let's see what Zach says he should do.
So this is about the sizing I'd expect from Jordan, this board texture. So I think my hand plays really well as a check raise. I pause before checking, considering donking, but I think this is just it's about the check raise. He's going to be c-betting a lot here. Likely, I think maybe a little bit too much. And this hand just plays great. I'm going to have a lot of turns that I can barrel. I have spades, I have eights and jacks. If I turn a 9 or a queen, I think I'm going to feel reasonably confident about my hand. And I just think he is, the main reason I'm check raising here is I have a candidate that doesn't really play well as a check call, and I think he's c-betting too much. So now I'm going to pick my sizing. I think roughly pot size is good, maybe a little bit bigger. So let's go with 285.
All right, so Zach, at the time, 1/2 of just hands. Check raises to 285. Queen nine of spades, pretty decent candidate. I think this hand functions well after facing a large bet size to check raise. This is a tricky one because if you don't have enough 10x in your range, you're just over bluffing by a lot.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I expect at least if he's going to pull this off in a balanced manner, he should be having hands like ace 10 offsuit, king 10, some queen 10s in here to offset a fair amount of his bluffs. I also think he should be check raising like 6x in here as well, some 4-5s.
So then what's the problem with his check raise?
I don't think there is a problem.
I do.
Oh, you mean the size? Okay. Yeah. I agree. The size is too big and is not representative of a 10.
Right.
And it's not representative of like a linear range that's going to put.
And I think Jordan kind of sniffed that out in real time, which is what kind of backs him into a weird corner. The size is just, it just screams bluff heavy with how large it is.
Agree. I still think that Jordan's hand doesn't function well as a.
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, I agree with you in a vacuum sense, but in a sense where we have more information. Like if
I think Jordan's hand is low enough.
If Zach exposed the queen, would you call?
I would. Well, yeah. I mean,
right. That's what I'm getting at. It's like with the sizing that he chose, it's disaligned or misaligned, I guess, to what we would perceive to be a polar range, because we know that he probably doesn't have pocket tens, and he has no 2-pair combos. He probably doesn't have 10-6 or 6-deuce. So it's literally just sixes or deuces, and he has so few of those combos compared to like the hands he could be bluffing with.
This is the thing. I'm not saying Jordan should fold. I just think Jordan can't call. I think
you like a 3-bet?
I think Jordan's hand is low enough in equity and not valuable enough to go through a call.
Okay.
That it shifts towards like a 3-bet or fold.
I mean, theory would disagree with you, of course, but I agree with you in a practicality sense. And the reason is that the reason theory would disagree is because ace queen has too much showdown value to turn itself into a bluff. The reason why I'm agreeing with you in a practical sense is because ace queen will never realize that showdown value.
Yeah, I don't see how Jordan continues on like what card 5. Like he needs the board to pair. Like,
yeah, like the expectation that out of position somehow somehow stops betting with its bluffs, or that we can clairvoyantly understand like
which cards
what are equity cards for us or high EV cards for us. It's really difficult because like even cards that improve our equity, like a jack or a king, may very well be a part of his check raising range,
especially a jack.
Yeah.
Jack is pretty paramount in terms of queen jack, jack 9.
I think
jack
a king 8. Too. I mean, I think like taking hands like king jack, king queen, and check raising those are like really good candidates on this board texture, especially if they have a diamond.
Yeah, I could see that. Especially when the problem is that Jordan's bet size shifts those hands into check raises, where if Jordan chooses the smaller bet size, then he actually.
I think this is a really good example though of why exploitative players are good. And it's not for any technical reasons.
Hell yeah.
Right?
It's the realest podcast.
Like he's going to lose this hand and he's going to make a lot of mistakes that we're going to be critical of, but it's often because he didn't have a very sound understanding of what baseline theory should be in this spot. So he chose the wrong size with the candidate, right? But he backs himself into this corner where he now conditions his opponent to overbluff, essentially.
Yeah. Well,
at least for the size that he chose now.
Right, for sure.
Right? So like he's now choosing a poor size for his bluffing candidates. And that information exchange becomes one such that the exploitative experienced player in Jai kind of recognizes like, yo, that's bullshit. There isn't a hand there. And now he has this like difficult decision of, well, do I have a bluff catcher or do I have a bluff?
Yeah.
And this is where it tends to crumble. The best exploitative players will know what triggers the pool, right? It'll be, I have a bluff catcher that can never catch bluffs, so I'm going to turn it into a bluff myself and just 3-bet this spot altogether.
Yeah, I agree with that. Let's see what Jordan says, because this is pretty interesting. Getting check raised 285. Let's see what he has in mind here.
I think this check raise is heavily weighted towards draws, specifically the nut flush draw. Could possibly be a pair plus flush draw, which would be top pair. But the hands that are made that beat me already are the sets, which there's only 9 combinations total of those. And I can, without a doubt, count 20 flush draw combinations that can check raise here. And it definitely helps that I don't block the ace or queen of diamonds here. I also think he has a lot of gut shot, backdoor spade draws. So I am going to call here with what I deem to be the best hand a high percentage of the time. I am going to kind of be a victim to the run out, but I have position, so I can utilize that in my favor as well.
It's aggressive, man. It's aggressive.
I just think where his mistake comes into play is when he tries to delineate Zach's range down to exactly good hands and flush draws. I think it's too simple.
Well, yeah. That's the thing. We're playing a weird game of what does Jordan think, which is,
well, we kind of know. We hear it.
Yeah. But we say like, okay, this range is like pure flush draws. Like effectively he's saying is a polar range, which is what we were saying the whole time.
Right, which is true. But the problem is that even in a polar range, it's not going to be sets and draws. Right. It's going to be sets and hands that possess a key diamond.
Yeah. I personally think ace 10 is a pretty good hand here. Like,
yeah. Yeah, for sure.
I think that hand can check raise to 285.
Yeah, I think so too. Especially like ace 10, ace of diamonds.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Zach's doing it, but I think that hand is good enough.
Agreed.
Sure.
I think it has to be specific though. I don't think you can do it with all ace 10. I think ace 10 with the ace of diamonds is plenty good enough. I think ace 10 with the 10 of diamonds becomes a little bit more problematic. And I think ace 10 with no diamond is
it's okay.
It's scary.
It's scary, but you have to live your life. Like you can't just like be scared of ace 10.
No, but the problem is that when we catch good for our perceived range, which is what happens. An offsuit 9 comes for Zach, and that's a perceived range card for him for sure.
Yeah.
When we catch those good perceived range cards, but we don't have any portion of that range, and we don't block any portion of that range, it becomes especially scary now that we're coming through the aggressive tree. Because it's still a button opening range. They could just have a lot more of that aspect of the range.
Well, I'll tell you how I think this hand should play. Obviously,
sizing's aside.
Yeah. No, well, this is what I think it should be. It should be like 75. Then he should check raise to like 200, get called, and then he should like mostly turn block this card.
Yeah.
And then I still think ace 10 performs like exceptionally well through.
Yeah.
Like just like, okay, turn block and then put him into a tough spot. Like,
which is what he chooses to do with this hand, and I think it's a lot easier with this hand.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like a block. It's like a the lower end of a catch-all size.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is I think it's easier with queen 9 when we turn middle pair, because we're shifting now from a pure bluff to a hand that has some showdown value and is going to kind of be in that like net where we could still extract value from some portions of his range that have to call, but we're also still losing to some of his bluff catchers.
Yeah, I like Zach's bet. It's a range bet. I think maybe too big, but fine. Like
it's debatable. Honestly, especially 2 years ago, I think it's fine.
Yeah.
I think like if he suddenly went 175 on the turn, it would just be one of those things where Jordan instinctually gets aggressive because that cadence didn't make sense in
at the time,
early 2017.
Right.
It's just like, well, huge check raise followed by a small bet on a equity driven card. Like this doesn't make sense. He just turned a 9.
Yeah.
So this is a pretty interesting card for my exact hand. I'm reasonably confident that I have the best hand most of the time, given how wide I think Jordan's going to be defending this. So now the question is, how does this hand get value against that range? He definitely has hands that are beating me. Very few 10x I think is 3-betting the flop. But I also think he has a lot of hands that he's planning on evaluating turn, maybe more as a float. Also, flush draws and hands with significant equity. I don't think he's playing 7-8 this way. I think this is actually an interesting spot to lead a little bit on the smaller side. So I continue to get value from floats, from draws, and I also, if he has 2 overcards, and decides to fold those hands, I don't really mind that too much. So I think I'll probably go with a sizing a little bit under, also just because exploitatively, something I like to do where it just, I think, looks kind of fishy when you pick a size a little bit smaller than a check raise size. Not sure how much it's going to affect Jordan, but something I like to do generally speaking. So I'm going to go with 275 here, betting for value.
Jordan now facing the turn bet of like roughly 40%. I think has like a pure like I don't think this
Such a
hand can
blatant
continue.
fold.
Yeah, I don't think this hand can continue.
The 9's just so bad.
I also think you have just like slightly better hands.
Well, we know that for
no,
sure.
I mean like even to continue as a float. Like
Yeah, but we're talking in the realm where like he thought he saw through something on the flop, and that's fine when the turn doesn't change anything. So if the turn's a 3 or a 4, even a 5, like I think it's a lot more reasonable for him to call again with what can often still be the best hand. On the turn 9 though, what he starts thinking is, oh, that opens up his drawing range more. So now hands like Queen Jack that check raise me, King Queen, King Jack, all these hands, like they have more equity and feel the need to bet more often. And it's like, well, yeah, that's true, but that is such a tiny subset of those types of hands. 9-8 also got there, Jack 9 also got there, and you know a plethora of other hands. It's like, and you have a queen. That's like a really negative event in this particular instance.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think Jordan should pure fold this. I'm trying to think of hands that would need to continue through that are not good hands.
Let's hear what he has to say.
Yeah, let's hear it. I'm actually a little curious.
All right, two things here. I think that this card pairs a lot of his combo draws, and then it pairs his ace-9 of diamonds as well. A lot of other draws are also incentivized to barrel here. If he were to check raise, say, King, Queen of Spades, King, Jack of Spades, Queen, Jack of Spades, all incentivized to bet here. The other thing I want to talk about is when it was on him, I was taking really deep breaths. That is to calm myself down, because if a non-diamond comes on the river, I'm planning to bluff shove over his bet.
I mean,
this is exploitive as it gets, man.
I mean, I don't see how.
Well, so this is where I think like it becomes problematic to fight without a weapon, and basically he backs himself into a situation where he recognizes that Zach's largely empty on the flop, and then he recognizes that the turn is
Opening up equity.
Well, it's just as far as the EV distribution goes, it's far more advantageous to Zach.
Correct.
Right? So he recognizes like, oh, he just turned a lot of showdown value against me and also increased his equity with a lot of his bluffs. And instead of arriving at, I have a fold now, he's too married to the fact that ace queen high was once the best hand and shifts into this really exploitative realm where it's like, I'm going to call here, have this guy put in more money on a non-diamond river, and then I'm just going to rip over his face. And honestly, it would have worked, but what he's overlooking is that when Zach has a 9, he's just not going to bet river.
Yeah, I mean, also, like, I think we're overlooking stack sizes here. Like, we're going to be running at, like, 1-to-1 SPR going into the river. If villain bets, like, what are you gonna
So I guess he's, like, hoping to see a block bet that he can shove over top of.
Yeah, I don't think we see it that
Right,
much.
because when he's empty, he's just going to be all in.
Correct. Yeah, so a little bit of a...
I wonder if he calls a rip on river. We'll never know.
I hope he does. I want to see it. Yeah, I mean, I actually think Zach played this hand very well.
Yeah.
The river is... Let's get to it. Excuse me. The river's an 8, and it's actually going to go check. Obviously, both players don't like this
I don't
card.
think he could call a shove on that card.
Right, and I don't think... should Zach turn his hand into a bluff on this river is pretty interesting, actually. This is probably one of the worst hands we land here with. This is actually pretty reasonable.
Yeah, I think maybe Jack 8 might be the only hand that's worse.
Yeah, this is a pretty reasonable shove. Containing the queen is pretty good. Block Queen Jack. We don't have a 7. We don't have 2 pair.
I think it's a really good
Yeah,
shove.
I think this hand becomes a shove on this river, actually.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I don't think Jordan, like, I think Jordan's like almost devoid of calls here.
Correct.
Like, he'll have some queen jack and like that's it.
Right.
I don't see him having
great,
very many one pair hands that can really hold, like, especially knowing Jai's tendencies. I think like he just smashes with jacks on the turn.
Yeah,
facing
I can see that.
that double barrel.
Right. Having the queen of spades is so key because you block Jordan's more realistic floats of, like, you know, hands that contain a queen that land on this river.
Right.
Because most of them are going to be like bet calls that start polarized with the queen of spades and then land on this river. So yeah, I completely agree. I think this is a pretty easy, if, you know, playing it now, you know.
Yeah, I think I would rip, and if he calls me with 10x, I would just kind of congratulate him and expect to make money in different ways.
Yeah, agreed. I like Zach's line onto the river. I think the river's a shove. I think, however, he said he was planning to check call.
Yeah, I mean that's reasonable for the same reasons, I guess. But the problem is like that's fine. The shove's just not going to come that often.
Right, not on this.
You're just going to lose a lot versus 10x or versus better 9x.
Well, 10x should just check.
That's why I'm saying you're just going to lose a lot because those hands are just going to check back.
Yeah, lose a lot through the check.
Yeah. Where like you actually have a lot of fold equity against those types of hands.
Yeah, agreed. There's also like some queens, some kings, some aces that are trapping.
And you also might just be wrong versus Jai's shove range. Like, he didn't choose to bluff this hand. He might not choose to bluff anything. He might only be ripping queen jack.
Yeah, I mean, what hands worse than this does Jai have?
Right, king queen, I guess.
Yeah. But I think
even that like has some incentive to be all in on the turn.
Right, he views king queen differently. Probably views it as like, I can't show down this hand, so he might take a different line. So through this line, this might be Jordan's bottom hand.
Yeah,
really interesting. It's always good to look at these hands like in a few years later because, you know, added information. Do you think that like 3 years later we'll be looking at a hand from today and being like,
oh god,
yeah,
bro, I watched like Rumble in the Jungle week and I thought I played really well that week, and there were so many cringy hands. Yeah,
well, I thought you played well too,
but like for the time, I don't think they were all that cringy. We were all still figuring it out in some capacity. We all still are, and same thing's gonna happen 3 years from now.
They asked me to bring a pen.
So you brought 3?
No, I have 3 pens.
They're all different.
Yeah, they're different. Depends what section of the show we're on. You didn't notice though.
I didn't.
This is the end of the show.
I see. All right, wrap it.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to it. So the plan is we're gonna release 3 of these, right?
Yep.
And they're each gonna have you know, their own little pod that goes with it, and then after that, we're going to release the student Poker Out Loud.
Yep.
That's going to be fun. I thought that went really well. So for those of you following along, we are going to do 3 of these top 10s, all with a podcast for one hand. And then after that, you get to see some of the people that we took under our goddamn wings. Some of them forced themselves there. And then they wanted to battle with us on Poker Out Loud. We had teams.
Yeah.
And one of us won and one of us lost. And it was fun. So I'm looking forward to the rest of this show. And I feel like you get a highlight. I feel like you get some more highlights in this one.
If I'm not number 1, I might quit the company.
I made the countdown, so like
I'm just saying, like, I know what hand should be number 1, and if it's not number 1, we have a problem.
You're an ex-fish. All right. Well, I hope you all enjoyed the show. Stay tuned. If you hit the like button, I love you. If you didn't hit the like button, get the fuck out. But for the rest of you, I love you. Good night. Sayonara.